Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council Parking Authority Redevelopment Agency meeting for May 5th, 2008. Madam Clerk, if you could please read the roll. Call the roll.
Councilmember Steve Glickman.
Present.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przinsky.
Here.
Vice Mayor Mike Wasserman.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Barbara Spector.
Here. Now, at each of our meetings, we have a future leader lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And those of you who may have seen us do it before, it's going to be a little bit different tonight. First of all, I am going to go down to the table, and I'm not going to have one future leader come up and meet me. I'm going to have 15 future leaders. If I don't get in anybody's way who's taking pictures here. Do I need to have the microphone? Thank you, Town Manager Greg Larson. And so the Brownies wanted to know, what do you do? So now you know. I stand behind the microphone, and he helps us get it up here. All right, tonight's future leaders are first grade Brownie Troop 61274. I'm going to have each of them come up here and join me one at a time, as soon as they got all their names. Lila Penner Brown, come on up. Emma Skeet. Devon Ottinger Elbert. Catherine Bonelli. Laura Cately. Samantha Borbas. Jasmine Donahue Ozyar. Gabriella Underwood. Naomi Grant. And her twin sister, Nicole Grant. Megan McDonald. Sophia Angus. Ella Mulcahy. Rosalie Jensen. And Sydney Shin. Now let me tell you a little bit about these young women. During the course of the year, Troop 61274 has marched in the Los Gatos Holiday Parade, created holiday gingerbread houses, attended a music performance, made birthday cards for the oldest living Girl Scout, a Palo Alto resident who turned 102, and earned 3 Try It badges. They are finishing up the year with a mother-daughter hike in May and an overnight camping trip in June. All of the Brownies attend Hillbrook School. And so at this time, what I'm going to do is point everybody to the flag over here and have you stand and join us while these young women lead the pledge. Okay, who's going to start it? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Come on, let's give them a round of applause. Now, before they leave, I want to show them something that I don't have mine on tonight. See, he has a pin. That is a pin that a council member or a vice mayor or a mayor wears, and you are going, each of you, going to be given the exact same pin. So as you walk back to your chair, let me give you this to you. So you have a mayor or council member pin. All right, we're sort of a little out of order, and I'm going to ask the Brownies just to stick around while we do a proclamation in a bit, okay? Little out of order, Mr. Korb, but we'll now have the closed session report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. Council did meet in closed session tonight concerning existing litigation, Gasway versus the Town of Los Gatos. Council gave direction to council, and no final actions were taken, and that concludes my report.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to be giving a couple of proclamations. And for the very first proclamation, I'm going to call up to receive it Christine Benninger. If you come up, please, Christine. Christine, it's really a pleasure and an honor to have her here. She has been the president of Humane Society Silicon Valley for the last 13 years?
15.
Oh, 15. How time flies when you're having a good time.
It does.
And she has done an absolutely fantastic job for the organization and continues to do so. I'm also going to ask to come up here and stand behind us representatives for Los Gatos Unleashed, Pet Pals Animal Assisted Therapy, and Society Dogs. So if we have representatives for these organizations, if you'll please come up here and join us. All right, now, the proclamation. Whereas among companion animals, dogs are unmatched in their devotion, loyalty, and friendship, and are unequaled in their ability to understand humans, working side by side with us and sharing our lives. And whereas owning a dog is a privilege and a responsibility, requiring long-term emotional and financial commitment and a safe environment in which to run and play. And whereas dogs are living in a majority of our households, and owning a dog encourages socialization and brings our community closer together. And whereas Los Gatos has an estimated 9,000 dogs with access to pet-friendly stores and cafes, and local organizations such as Humane Society Silicon Valley, Los Gatos Unleashed, Pet Animal Assisted Therapy, Pet Pals Animal Assisted Therapy, and Society Dogs that enhance the lives of dogs and humans alike. Whereas the magic of human-animal bond has the power to transform lives and should be celebrated through special recognition, now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Barbara Spector, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the town of Los Gatos, do hereby proclaim Saturday, May 17th, 2008, as the day in which Los Gatos, the town of the cats, becomes Los Perros for a day.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm absolutely honored to be here, and I really wanted to thank the Town of the Cats for sharing a day with the dogs. And I know that every single dog in the town of Los Gatos is absolutely honored to know that they have a very special day of their own, which is going to be Saturday, May 17th. And I have to give the town itself kudos for the fact that you've really created such a wonderful pet-friendly place where you can bring your pet, you can dine, you can shop, you can just socialize. You do such a fabulous job of really creating responsible pet ownership and at the same time wonderfully celebrating the magic of the human-animal bond. So thank you very much.
Now I'm going to invite up a representative of the dog community. Okay. Sit. Shake. Shake. Oh, good girl. This is Winnie. Good girl. Thank you. And before I allow you to go back to your seats, I have here and
Sue-Ling Cho from Society Dog.
Manola Montagne from Pet Pals.
Andrew Zielinski from Pet Pals.
Kim Daly from Los Gatos Unleashed.
Lauren Gallagher from all of these organizations.
all of the above. Okay, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. We have one more proclamation. And I'll ask Kevin Rouhani to join me. Now, I want you to know, I practiced a half hour with Winnie yesterday, and she tried really hard to, teach me how to do it, and wasn't very successful, but she did perfectly, so thank you. Want to come over here, please? A proclamation, whereas public works services are an integral part of our everyday lives, and whereas a supportive and informed community is vital to the efficient operation of public works systems and programs, such as streets and highways, public buildings, and solid waste collection, and whereas the quality and effectiveness of these facilities, as well as their planning, design, and construction, is dependent upon the efforts and skills of public works professionals, and whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works departments is materially influenced by a community's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform, now therefore be it resolved, I, Barbara Spector, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the town of Los Gatos, do deem it appropriate and do hereby proclaim May 18th through 24th, 2008 as National Public Works Week within the town of Los Gatos, and call upon residents, businesses, and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing public works and recognize the contributions which public works professionals make every day to our health, safety, and quality of life. Thank you, and here's Kevin Rouhani to...
Thank you, Mayor Spector and the Council. The Department certainly appreciates your continued support. As a part of the National Public Works Week this year, on May 22nd, Parks and Public Works Department has an open house planned at the Corporation Yard. from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. We have tours for various schools. We have our department open to show a wide range of services that we provide. Information on that is on the web. Certainly, all members of the community are invited. Should be a fun day. Last year, we had a very good turnout by a lot of school kids and others. And so this year will be our second annual Public Works open house. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we started the meeting, these young women were asking me, what the town does. Well, you've heard from Mr. Rouhani part of what they do, and you also heard that he has an open house, and I went to it last year, and the kids were having a fantastic time. You get to go all over the equipment. You might be able to have the water come down on you if it's a warm day, so I encourage you to attend if you can. Now, before we actually get to the meeting, would be a good time. Those of you who are here because you're brownies or because you have or love dogs, this would be a good time to leave.
Hey girls, come on.
While they're filing out, let me remind everybody, if you intend to speak on any item on the agenda, any item, please fill out a speaker card and bring it to the clerk. So, on any item. And I would ask someone in the back of the room if you could please close the doors for a while. Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is consent items. Thank you. Consent items. These will be acted upon in a single motion unless someone from the council or from the public removes any one of them from the consent calendar. I already have pulled from the consent calendar agenda item 8, which is the council agency minutes of April 21st, 2008. All items pulled from the consent calendar will be heard following other business. Other items to be pulled from the consent calendar, first looking to the council. Anyone else from the public? All right, then the only item that will be pulled from the agenda consent calendar will be number 8. May I have a motion?
Move for approval of items 1 through 7.
Second.
I have a motion to approve 1 through 7. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item on our agenda, verbal communications. Up to 3 minutes to be allotted to each speaker to address matters that are not on tonight's calendar. Tonight's agenda. And I should note that even for these items, you should have submitted a speaker card. I have 2 cards. The first one, Deborah Whitehouse. If you could please come up here, and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Deborah Wheatus. and I'm here to talk with you about myself, my profession, which is Rolfing, and your massage ordinance. I've lived in this town for over 17 years, and I've been practicing in this town for over 17 years with a business license. And I propose that the practice of Rolfing needs to be exempted specifically from your massage ordinance. The United States Food and... Excuse me, you can't hear? Okay. Yes, that is better. The United States Food and Drug Administration and the United States Department of Education both state that Rolfing is not massage. It is structural integration and functional integration work. In addition to this, your police captain said to me, well, do you touch bodies? And the answer to that question is yes. But the line of thinking that if I touch bodies, therefore it's massage, is the same as looking at a software engineer and saying, do you touch the phone, do you touch letters, do you make appointments, and if you do, then therefore you are a secretary. We all know that the training, the skills, and the tasks of a software engineer are much greater than that of a secretary, and that's the same situation between massage and Rolfing. When I left training 17 years ago with my basic training, I had over 3 times the education you require in your ordinance. When I set up my business, I had over 3 times the liability insurance you require in your ordinance. Now, 17 years later, I have close to 9 times the training you require. Part of the reason for that is because when I left training, I have something that no massage practitioner ever has. I was under contract to the Rolf Institute of Structural Integration to uphold their standards of practice, to fulfill their code of ethics and uphold those, to continue the studies, my studies in this profession for the duration of my career, and many other little things, but those are the major ones. What I'm proposing to you is that Rolfing is not massage and needs to be exempted. And why I'm here today is because your police department has scheduled an appointment with me this Friday for me to be fingerprinted in accordance with this massage ordinance. What I would like from you is I would like my $140 returned to me, which I paid in December, and I paid it so that I wouldn't have to practice under threat of fines or arrest. I would like the Friday appointment with the police department for my fingerprints. I would like that canceled. I would like Rolfing exempted from your massage ordinance. And I would like a letter saying that Rolfing is exempted from your massage ordinance so that I can keep that for my records. Thank you. And you all have the letter that spells out this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we were given, for the record, a letter dated May 5th, 2008. Verbal communication, the only other card I have, Citizen Ray.
Hey, I'm up. Ready. Nice to see some of you. First comment. You know, in America today, we keep hearing this comment about where are the heroes? Where are the heroes in America? Okay? And I want to tell you, maybe we're looking for the wrong gender. I think in Los Gatos here, we don't have a hero, we have a heroine. Guess who that is? None other than Barbara Spector, the mayor. Barbara is the fantastic human being that has taken on the duty to litigate for justice and truth in the Deanza Den rape. She is going to represent the 17-year-old girl who was put upon so badly, okay? So I respect you, Barbara Spector. You stood up and you said, hey, why shouldn't I? And you're going to do it, and how wonderful. So there you are, heroine of the year in Los Gatos, okay? Next. Just what turned up at the commission retreat. The commission, the park commission said, what's going on with $1.9 million in parking, designated for parking? I said to myself, what $1.9 million? I know of no directive, no standing policy by the town council that warrants $1.9 million being pigeonholed. None. So upon investigation, I found out that almost $2 million has just been put aside, designated as committed, but no particular designation for funding, no directive by anybody, just $2 million laying there, maybe used someday, possibly, all right? And I say to myself, what about Sarah Cole? What about the fact that for a lousy $150,000, $200,000, that parking lot on the park side of Baggerly Field could have been installed and Sarah Cole could be walking normally today?
Thank you.
The hazard still exists.
Thank you.
Get with it. But I'm coming back.
Does staff want to reply to either one of the verbal communications?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, staff did receive the letter today from the first speaker, and as the council is well aware, the council does not have legal authority to take any action or direction on anything presented under verbal communications. Staff has next scheduled discussion of the massage ordinance for one of your June meetings, and staff will review the letter from the first speaker prior to Friday's meeting and take appropriate action within staff discretion if any is allowed or warranted. As to the other matter brought up by the second speaker, there is indeed nearly $2 million that the council has repeatedly approved over prior years as part of the budget as a set-aside for downtown parking, and it is an issue that the council will be revisiting at the May 19th budget hearing, and staff has recommendations to bring forward at that time.
Thank you. All right, now we are on to the public hearing.
Sarah Cole.
That's the first instruction, first warning. Public hearings. And at this point, we have two public hearings, and I'm once again going to ask everyone to make sure they have submitted the speaker cards. This is especially significant this evening because the cards and my counting them and looking them over will determine how many minutes each speaker gets to speak. But before we get to that, we have Agenda Item 9, which is to consider and adopt resolution approving the redevelopment agency midterm review of the 5-year implementation plan and affordable housing production plan for the Central Los Gatos redevelopment project for the period of July 1st, 2004 to June 30th, 2009. This is a public hearing, but we will begin with staff report.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, given the length of discussion anticipated for the next item, staff is available if you wish to make a report or to answer any questions council or the public may have. There was extensive documentation provided in the council packet as well as on the web that documents our progress since the adoption of the 5-year plan and our projected actions for the remainder of the 2 years ahead of us.
Do we have any questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much. And as always, thank you for an excellent report. 2 questions. It's my understanding from previous council discussions that RDA funds will be used to support the proposed library project. I didn't see that in the report, perhaps because I didn't read it carefully enough. Was that mentioned in the report?
The report really is talking about the past activities. It doesn't talk about projected use of redevelopment funds, but the council member is absolutely correct that the council has earmarked that for a library project in the future, but additional steps need to be taken.
Okay, I appreciate that. I would wonder whether that allocation would impact any of the indicated ongoing projects that are non-housing. And the staff can comment on that now would be appropriate, or you can inform us later.
No, there would not be any impacts on ongoing projects. The projects that are identified in the capital improvements program and are funded through the redevelopment agency would be secure for future use, but the council will be making some adjustments possibly to that through the next CIP, which will be coming up on May 19th.
Okay, thank you very much. And just a final comment. I noticed that in looking at Table 2 on page 3, I believe we have about $6.8 million in the 20% housing set-aside. I call it a set-aside because those funds must be used for affordable housing. I'll just make the comment that I would like to see more progress in that area. That's a lot of money. We have done some things, but in my humble opinion, not nearly enough. Thank you.
All right, does staff have any other comments? I'm going to open it up for public hearing. Okay, I'm now opening up this for public hearing. I don't have any cards on this item. Seeing no one coming forward, I will close the public hearing and look to the council for a motion.
Madam Mayor?
Mr. Brzezinski?
I'll move to adopt the attached resolution, that's attachment 1, approving the 5-year implementation plan and affordable housing production plan midterm review for the Central Los Gatos redevelopment project for July 1, 2004 to June 30, 2009.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. Brzezinski, seconded by Mr. Wasserman. Discussion? Mr. Glickman.
Thank you. I intend to support the motion. I just wanted to have the comments that I made included. I think that, again, that the staff has done a good job, but I think the areas that I mentioned need some further attention.
All right, seeing no further comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, before I get on to agenda item 10, I see that I have speaker cards still coming forward, and if staff could hand those over to me, please. All right, given the number of speakers, what we're going to do is, first of all, the applicant, who is represented here by several individuals, the applicant will have 10 minutes collectively for whomever the applicant wants to represent him, and I have cards that have been clipped together that says applicant presenters, and I'll get to their names in a second. Then the members of the public will each have 2 minutes, and then at the end of that, the applicant will have, again, collectively 5 minutes. So it'll be 10 minutes, 2 minutes for each member of the audience, and then 5 minutes collectively for the applicant. Do we have a staff report?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, yes, we do have a brief staff report. As the council is aware, the DeSantis residence has been before this body twice before, and so what we will do is pick it up from the last meeting. The council provided direction to the applicant at the last meeting in 3 areas. The request was to reduce the amount of export to 8,000 cubic yards or less, to reduce the house size to less than 10,000 square feet, and to reduce the encroachment outside the least restrictive development area, commonly referred to as LRDA. Since the last meeting, we have updated the initial study to reflect the current project. It has been recirculated, and there has been a response to comments prepared, and the council received that on Friday. The applicant has requested 4 exceptions to the hillside development standards and guidelines. The first one has to do with the height of the main residence, which exceeds 25 feet. The second is, as previously mentioned, development outside the least restrictive development area. The third relates to the house exceeding the 6,000 square feet allowable floor area. And in that particular issue, the applicant initially came in with a house of 11,775 square feet. It was subsequently reduced to the less than 10,000 square feet as directed by council, and was 9,965 square feet, and it is currently 8,650 square feet, exclusive of the cellar, the guest quarters, and the garage. The final item has to do with cuts and fills that exceed the maximum allowable depths. That concludes staff's brief report. We're certainly here to answer any questions. The applicant has their own PowerPoint presentation, and we'd be happy to respond to any comments or questions.
All right, let's start with the council. Any questions for staff? Yes, Mr. Glickman.
Yes, thank you very much, either to Mr. Lortz or to Mr. Korb, Town Attorney. One of the issues that was raised in the materials that were presented to us raises the question of whether legally the subject property could be, at some future time or perhaps by some future owner, subdivided into two lots. It would seem to me, based on the input that I've gotten, that, and please, I look for correction here, it's a question, that there seem to be three possible accurate statements. One is that no, they could not legally be subdivided. The other is, yes, he has every right to subdivide it. And the third might be, well, there might be with some council approval. So could we get an accurate legal statement of the situation concerning that situation?
Mr. Korb, did you want to respond to that?
I'll give it a shot. Well, it's less a legal issue at this point in time than it is a technical issue, because the research that staff has done, and I know that the applicant has also done some research and will probably address it during their presentation, seems to indicate that there was a prior subdivision of the property. That subdivision, under the rules that were in existence at the time, was not at the maximum level of density. It was at 16 rather than 18 parcels, 18 being the maximum at that time. And that subdivision did not result in any further restrictions with regard to subdivision on the remaining parcel, which was the DeSantis, or currently the DeSantis parcel. The slope density formula, which applies to all development in the hillside area, requires that we go back and examine all subdivisions, or at least the base subdivision of property, to determine whether the maximum density was reached in that subdivision, and if not, that allows additional subdivisions of the parcels that resulted from that subdivision, to make a long story short. And in this situation, we have not, in our research, been able to determine that there is any prohibition against at least one more subdivision into two lots of the DeSantis parcel. There would have to be a great deal of calculation done under the slope density formula to be absolutely certain of that, which is the technical aspect that has not been done because there's no subdivision proposal as part of this project. And that would require a great deal of engineering work to come up with that information. But again, as far as our research tells us, there is no legal prohibition that we can see against at least one more subdivision of the DeSantis parcel.
Thank you very much. That answers my question.
Other questions for staff? I have a couple. With regard to the items where the applicant deviates from the standards, was it staff that asked or suggested that portions of the home be 30 feet rather than 25 feet?
No. We have consistently asked the applicant to comply with the 25 feet requirement. The applicant, through an architectural process, chose not to go with a 25-foot height limit more from architectural perspectives and concerns, rather than necessarily being able to comply. Physically, the roof could be flattened, but architecturally that starts to diminish the architectural integrity of the home. Both our consultant concluded that, our architectural consultant, and their consultant concluded that.
But did our architectural consultant say you should have 30 feet? I mean, is that like a recommendation?
No.
And then on page 4 of the staff report, there's a grading summary. And I just wanted to confirm that where you have the proposed 23 feet cut depth feet for the house, that excludes the cellar?
That would be my understanding, is that it would not include the cellar, and then I'll confirm that.
Because it would be my understanding that it shouldn't, because the 8, which is allowed, excludes the cellar.
Correct.
And then one more, it appears that we are at 7,560 cubic yards of off-haul, and I knew this perfectly last February, but I don't remember now. That calculates to how many trips?
It's about 10 yards per dump truck.
All right.
Depending on what type of vehicle they use.
Right. Little truck, big truck, but we're going to go with the odds. Okay. Other questions? No. Thank you very much. All right. We begin with the applicant, which is a collective applicant. And you will have 10 minutes. I'm going to just read into the record the names that the applicant gave me. And then it will be up to you, of course, to decide who says what and when. But the names that were provided me were Craig Reed, Richard Irish, Brian Pinkett, and Andrew Faber. And so the applicant.
And just as a point of clarification, we thought we needed to put those in, but all those people won't be speaking during my presentation.
Well, this will give them an option.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council members. My name is Rob DeSantis. As you know, we began developing our home almost 4 years ago. Before getting into details, though, I'll provide a quick recap of our home plans. My family's plan is to build one home instead of subdividing and building 2 homes on a property that spans across 13.7 acres in a non-visible location. We have spent almost 4 years working collaboratively with the town, the neighbors, and being environmentally sensitive. The 13.7 acre property, a property that is not visible from any of the town's viewing platforms or adjacent neighbors, is an exceptional large site and incorporates over 600 trees and rolling meadows. An important concept that we included on the site is hillside restoration. Many years ago, my property was disturbed by human touch through significant grading. Rather than protecting the site in its altered state, we have found that restoration of some of the original contours will help reduce export and minimize retaining walls, as well as return parts of the property to a more natural state. Another major element of this site is I have the legal right to subdivide the property where the slope density calculation exceeds 2.9. According to the town zoning and regulations, if I subdivide, I could build much more floor area than I am proposing. With my plan, I'm giving up the right to subdivide. In doing that, it makes my home much better for the environment, the site, the town, and the neighbors. Over 3 years ago, in an effort to inform and involve our neighbors, we contacted all the property owners shown on this map and presented our original, larger design. We received almost overwhelming support from the respondents and one verbal objection. We have written support from all the properties shown in dark green. We received 55 signatures in support of our plan from our neighbors. While it is important for all of us to acknowledge the intent of our hillside guidelines, we also feel it is important to highlight a few facts about our homes in the town. There are 91 homes in Los Gatos greater than 6,000 square feet. Of these, our proposed home would have the 3rd lowest FAR. There are 15 homes larger than our proposed home in Los Gatos. and 5 of those 15 are either on Kennedy or Forrester Road. Regarding site and architectural, we have clearly followed the hillside standards and guidelines. No issues have ever been raised with regard to architecture, site, or materials used. Outside of 2 grading concerns, LRDA and grading cut and fill, which I will address later, there are 2 minor exceptions to the guidelines. The first is height. 100% of the roof is below 35-foot height limit and 30 feet and the 30-foot height town code. One element, however, is at 29 feet, which is 4 feet higher than the hillside standard for a single element. This means that 92% of the house fits all of the height and sub-height requirements, and that 8% is still below the overall maximum code. This approach was implemented to achieve a variation in roof lines and high-quality architecture. In fact, the town's professional, independent, third-party expert consulting architect praised it, stating the project is well-designed and will have minimal visual impact on the surrounding area. The second exception is floor area for one home on one lot. However, exceptions are explicitly allowed for an exceptional property, which is what is exemplified by this site with 13.7 acres, 600 trees, and no visual impact. As I noted in my letter to you reiterating the evidence in the record, shown on this page are the 9 conditions required to exceed floor area, which we have met. Also worth noting is that we conform to town zoning code and no variances are requested. Besides being environmentally sensitive to the site, we've also designed the home to be precedent-setting in terms of sustainable design and green building. Our goal is 100% solar electricity as well as energy savings through other innovative technologies. We have committed to exceeding Title 24 requirements and the new Green Point rated system that has recently been adopted by the Santa Clara County for Build a Green construction. Okay, enough background. Now to where we left off last year. In February 2007, Council gave very clear direction to come back addressing 3 items as noted earlier by Bud Lortz. First, a grading plan that had less than 8,000 cubic yards of export without creating environmental impact. Second, minimize the LRDA as much as possible while balancing environmental issues. And third, bring a home size less than 10,000 square feet. In April, we returned to Council with all 3 conditions met. During the Council meeting, however, an environmental question was raised by a member of the public, and town legal staff felt it was necessary not to take action that night. The next day, it was cleared up and found that everything was in order. That said, we decided to again listen to Council feedback and refine the 3 items further based on ideas from town planning and engineering staffs. The ideas worked. We were able to reduce grading an additional 4.3% to 7560 and at the same time save 6 more trees. LRDA was also improved to 95% compliance. Also, due to personal events, a family decision was made to reduce my home size by an additional 13% to 8650. Although we had Council's direction last April, we continued to listen to Council feedback. We have lost yet another year of family memories. Both I and the town have invested a lot of time, energy, and resources to get where we are today, and I don't see how anything further could be done. I am confident in this plan for our home. It represents a great opportunity for this exceptional property, for the town of Los Gatos, and for my family. Tonight, you may hear opposition to my home from people who are not my neighbors. I've met my neighbors, and they clearly don't want a subdivision on this property, which is my only alternative if not to build my home. It is clearly better for the site and for the environment. In conclusion, I would like to stress the fact that we have an exceptional property that is also subdividable. I am proposing far less square footage than if I were to build 2 homes, 2 garages, barns, as allowed in the hillside standards and guidelines. The project has no visual impact, and we are committed to incorporating green architecture. Your approval of a planned development for this project would ensure land use closure for 13.7 acres. And lastly, I would like to believe the fact that we collaborated so closely with the town, addressed your 3 concerns, and have obtained the support of our neighbors will all have a positive effect on your decision. I will now introduce Andy Faber, one of the attorneys who has reviewed the application and the complete environmental review. After Andy speaks, please feel free to ask myself, Brian from Landry Design Architecture, Norm Maglione, our land use attorney, and Andy, any questions now or during your discussion, as well as the other consultants that you mentioned earlier. Thank you. Andy?
Thank you, Andy Faber. I've been asked to look at the mitigated negative declaration and examine it for CEQA compliance in this matter. I do that from a public perspective because it's your document. The consultant is hired by the town. The approval, if you give it, is by the town, and it's ultimately your negative declaration. Although I'm in a private firm, we are city attorneys for Gilroy and Los Altos, so we see these from the public side, and I am a special CEQA counsel to several cities on individual projects. CEQA normally doesn't require this kind of analysis for a single-family dwelling. Most dwellings are categorically exempt, meaning that you don't do an initial study, you don't do a mitigated negative deck, or you certainly don't do an EIR. However, it's within the province of the town to require that this additional analysis be done if you choose to. It's appropriate here where this is an unusual project. This analysis has been exhaustive, it's been complete, it's been performed by the town's consultant who has gone through several iterations. She's had background reports from various consultants, from geotech, from biological, arborist, et cetera. And the result is a document that fairly lays out all of the potential environmental impacts of the project. I've had occasion to look at the letters that have been sent in opposition to it. I've reviewed them. I wrote a letter which is in your packet. And probably most significantly, Ms. Geyer has responded as well with a memo that is also in your packet, where she has responded to the technical issues that have been raised. I don't believe that these letters raise any actual legal CEQA issues. They raise project issues. They're clearly written by people who would like changes made in the project. And you may have the ability to make those changes. I mean, it's your discretion here on the zoning. But CEQA doesn't require you to do it. The mitigated negative declaration that's been prepared is adequate. It's in compliance with CEQA. It gives you the tools that you need. It gives the public the tools they need to understand the environmental impacts of your decision on this project. It gives you the ability to approve the project. Of course, it doesn't force you to approve the project, but it gives you the information you need in compliance with CEQA. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we'd like, if specific issues come up, the chance to rebut them. And I'll turn it back over to Rob, unless you have questions for me.
Why don't you go ahead and have the 10 minutes, and then we'll see who we need to ask questions of.
I think that's it.
That's it. Okay, well, then we are to questions. All right, I look to council for questions of the applicant. Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I look to you for guidance on this. I've got a couple of specific questions to ask the applicant. Do you want me to do it now or after the rebuttal?
I don't think I understand the question, but I'll answer it anyway now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. DeSantis, as far as the 4 exceptions that were brought out in the staff report, the height of the main residence, development outside the LRDA, exceeding the floor area, and the cuts and fills, I look at those and I look at the project, and except for the height, which is an architectural thing, which is not such a biggie to me, the other 3 seem to be caused by the amount of overall development. And yes, you brought the house size down and this and that, but when you combine the tennis court and the swimming pool, et cetera, by having those items and the size that they are, causes development, 1, outside of the LRDA, which is one of the exceptions of concern, 2, the size of the home causes exceeding the floor area, and 3, the cuts and fill between what is allowed and what is proposed. Again, each of those requested exceptions, in my eyes, are because of the size of the development and the number of pieces. So very simplistically, for instance, if the tennis court wasn't there, I'm not sure there would be any exceptions when you get down to the grading and the LRDA, et cetera, et cetera. So just that generic question is, from my standpoint, you want X, Y, and Z, and because of what's on that wish list, you, in my opinion, currently exceed 3 of the 4 exceptions. It seems like there's a simple solution there. Are you open to that, or do you have a comment in response to that?
2 thoughts come to mind. One is more hillside guideline comment, and the second one is the project comment. And I think you're driving towards the latter, but I'll highlight both. I think the first one is with respect to the four exceptions that you referenced and is referenced in staff report. It clearly states in the Hillside Standards and Guidelines, page 29 and 30, says, exceptions from the standards in this document may only be granted after carefully considering the constraints of the site, and any deviation from the standards contained shall include the rationale and evidence to support this deviation. And I think my first high-level response to that is that has been performed. I would also highlight that one of those exceptions has created what I call an infinite do loop if you know much about software programming, because it says if you want more floor area, you got to meet these exceptions, and all the exceptions must be met. And one of the exceptions says you have to keep the house below, you have to keep the floor area below a certain level. So the document self-contradicts itself when it comes to floor area. So there's no way I could have floor area below it and be proposing more than it. So that's one thought. Now, with respect to the issue of, well, could we eliminate the tennis court? Yeah, we could eliminate the tennis court. Could we eliminate other elements of the project? We could. If we did, we wouldn't have my family home, though. And so at that point, when the value of the project gets past the point where it's not of appropriate value for me to make the large investment that I'm about to make, then my solution is to do something else, and because I have no choice. And then and so what we've tried to do is being very careful in how we preserve the core elements of this project while at the same time meeting the town's objectives. And I think we got darn close, but we are confident that we're at the kind of the best part. We're not going to get any better. So
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions? Thank you. We have none.
No more questions?
No more questions. And before we get into the testimony of the people here to speak, our last meeting on this agenda item was in April of 2007, so I will ask council to inform us if they've had any meetings with the applicants or residents or other individuals on this. One, and also I would ask the council if you've had these meetings and if what you've learned in those meetings becomes an issue or is of significance to you in making your decisions down the line, if you also disclose that to us. So, Mr. Glickman, I'm going to start with you.
Yes, I met with Mr. DeSantis and I visited the property.
Since April, I met with Mr. DeSantis.
I have met with Mr. DeSantis, and I also had a telephone call with him.
I've had discussions with the applicant, discussions with other residents, and viewed a Google Earth from Christine Curry.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes, I met with Mr. DeSantis once and also had a phone conversation with him, and I did a drive-by on the site.
And I also saw the Google Earth, but it's my understanding that we are going to be seeing that here, but I'll ask staff.
It's our hope, and we'll see when we get to public comment.
All right, and then we'll decide at that point how much Mr. Wasserman and I will discuss what we saw on our computers. All right, public testimony. First card, Peter Donnelly. And I'm going to name the next two people after Mr. Donnelly so that you can be prepared. Come on up, Kenneth Houghton and Ellen Feinberg.
Yes, good
The
evening.
mayor directed 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
This is 2 minutes.
Good evening. I only have a couple of points here. I am a property owner in Los Gatos. I own an exceptional property of 15.5 acres. I've been in front of the Planning Commission before for a subdivision. During the start of my process 4 years ago, I presented a proposed design for 2 homes. They were exceptional designs. Architecturally, they looked very nice. We were told they wouldn't work. We were told there was a set of hillside standards and guidelines to guide development in the town of Los Gatos. Standards, per the document, have to be met. Guidelines should be met. And we took that to heart and went away and worked on our project. Since then, we've come back with 2 designs that meet all of the hillside standards and guidelines. We too would love to have extra things in our plan, but we can't. And the only comment I would say here is, if this does get approved, you set a precedent, and I'll be back asking for some things that perhaps aren't in the rules that we would like. That's all I wanted to say tonight. Treat everybody consistently, because it's costing me a lot of money to ensure that I conform to all of the standards and guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Donnelly? All right. There aren't, but thank you. Mr. Houghton?
Thank you. I'm Ken Houghton. I live at 16200 Kennedy Road, about 300, maybe 400 yards from this property. I did not see, in fact, incredibly, I didn't even hear about this project till Friday. That's day before yesterday, or 2 days before yesterday. So I'm astounded by that. I came to Los Gatos in 1964 and built my house on Kennedy Road, and I met all the zoning requirements. Now, admittedly, at that time, it was in the county, not in the city. He managed to annex it while I was out of town, but that's neither here nor there. I only ask that people meet requirements like I met requirements, and I also ask that that somehow the communication process be improved. I would like to have heard about this project quite a long time ago, and I heard about it Friday. And that was because some of the people in the audience notified me. Los Gatos engaged a lot of people developing a master plan and plans for hillside development, and they worked hard. A lot of them did. And perhaps it's important that we pay close attention to what those folks had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Nope. All right. Alan Feinberg. And after Mr. Feinberg, I would like David Kreitz, Dale Hill, and Gil Decker to be ready.
Madam Mayor, members of the Town Council, fellow Los Gatos residents, thanks for the opportunity to speak before the Council this evening. My name is Alan Feinberg. I've been a resident and a property owner in Los Gatos now for 19 years. And in that 19 years, I've seen a tremendous amount of change, as we all have, in the town that we love so dearly. If my face isn't familiar, if my name isn't familiar, it's because I don't regularly attend council meetings, I don't write letters to the editor, I don't get involved in town politics, and maybe I should, but that's beside the point. I feel compelled to speak out tonight because I'm concerned that, as Mr. DeSantis so correctly mentioned, we've spent 4 years of the council's time and his time and money on an issue that could have been settled 4 years ago. Since we have standards and guidelines, it seems to me that it would be a reasonable approach to stick to those standards and guidelines. My real concern is that if we follow through with the recommendations before the council tonight, we'll be setting new standards and guidelines and essentially changing the character of the town based on the size of the homes, and I shouldn't just say the houses, the entire properties that can be developed within the town. And that's a significant concern of mine. Thanks very much.
Thank you. David Kreitz.
David Kreitz at 15900 Roshan Terrace, and the focus of my comment tonight concerns the use of the planned development zone for this project. California Government Code 65852 requires that zoning regulations be enforced uniformly in an effort to prevent favoritism and discrimination. In Topanga Association for a Scenic Community versus County of Los Angeles, the California Supreme Court explains that, quote, a zoning scheme is similar in some respects to a contract. Each party forgoes rights to use its land as it wishes in return for the assurance that the use of neighboring properties will be similarly restricted. Recent decisions indicate that the courts consider ad hoc regulations, like the ordinance you are considering tonight, to be discriminatory because they grant benefits that are unavailable to other property owners. In this case, the applicant is proposing that a zoning ordinance be created to regulate a zone that applies only to just one single-family residence. Clearly, then, it's impossible to achieve the uniformity required by state law because no other property is similarly regulated. So, adopting a single-family PD would be a clear violation of California zoning regulations. Now, just forget about the law for a minute and think, does it seem equitable to you that your neighbor could create a planned development on his property in order to skirt the zoning regulations that are in effect in your neighborhood and on your property? Remember, once his PD is placed into effect and it's passed, there's no way for you to apply for similar treatment.
Thank you. All right, we have Dale Hill, followed by Gil Decker and Jack Ferrone.
Good evening. My name is Dale Hill. I live at 150 Robin Way, which coincidentally is just down Kennedy Road, but not on it. There are 2 points I want to make, both quite briefly. The first is a historical note. I was a member of the Planning Commission exactly 30 years ago, it's hard to believe, when the Las Vegas subdivision was being considered. As I recall, it took many meetings. The clustering of lots along Forester Road was done to minimize the need for infrastructure, more roads, long driveways, more sewers, etc. The trade-off for grouping the homes was the remainder parcel of 14 acres, or almost 14, which is the subject of this application. Because the town and county hillside-specific plan, which I also helped develop, was adopted by the council midway through that application process, the allowable number of lots was reduced under the new slope density formula, whatever, from 18 to 16. My second point is simply absolute shock that a compound of this scale is even being considered for this hillside parcel. It contradicts all the principles of hillside development, which are to do the least damage to the land. A person who wants this much building on one level should locate it on flatter terrain. This reminds me of the way they now mine coal in the Appalachian Mountains. Just take off the top of the mountain and don't worry about what's downhill. I see no effort made to have the various buildings conform to the topography. The buildings themselves may well be built to green standards, which is a good thing, but that effort is pretty well canceled by the environmental infill. Thank you.
Thank you. Gil Decker.
I'll try not to be redundant. I appreciate the 2 minutes problem. I'd just like to deal with a couple of issues. Talk about the general plan. The introduction of the general plan says, and I quote, "The role of each community's general plan is to act as a constitution for development, the foundation upon which all land use decisions are to be based." And it continues and says, "A general plan is a legal document that must meet requirements." Our society says you got to be constitutional. The statement, the plan is a legal document, affirms this principle. Then I would like to talk about the Hillside Development Guidelines. The introduction paragraph of the Hillside Plan states the Town Planning Commission appointed a subcommittee to study the Hillside specific plan to ensure that it was still consistent with the general plan. And in 2004, the Town Council approved the guidelines. So I assert that any action by the council that approves, that violates hillside development essentially violates the town constitution. That's a serious issue. The first speaker with his large plot said he went back to the drawing board and made everything fit. In my own case, I don't live on the hillside, but I think the hillsides must be preserved, and that's the whole objective. But we bought a house in 1997 built in 97 that was built in 1907. And the instruction we gave the architect when we redid it was, I do not want one waiver. And if you can't do it, I'll get another architect. It's possible. So I don't buy this notion that you can't meet the guidelines, and hillsides are especially important. So I certainly, and I have no animosity or objection to Mr. DeSantis, but the guidelines for the hillsides, and hillsides are precious, and I do encourage you to reject this project.
Thank you. Jack Ferroni.
Yes, I'm Jack Ferrone, directly across Kennedy Road from Rob's project. We share, I'm guessing, 300 feet of Kennedy Road. And I will see this project. I'm probably the only one in the town in this room that will see it, for where our house is located. I enjoy looking out at, a bucolic scene every morning with my coffee from our kitchen window. Who doesn't enjoy looking at the deer and the coyotes? We heard this last time when we were here. But I think we have to be honest with ourselves, and if the question should be not what's going to happen if Rob builds his house, what's going to happen if he doesn't build the house. If he doesn't build the house, I am going to have to look at two houses. And I'd much rather look at one thoughtfully architected house than two perhaps poorly architected houses. And I think you need to consider that. I mean, the gentleman with the legal background here was talking about consistent legal enforcement. Rob's not asking for any favors. He's willing to give up rights for one of his parcels in order to get some additional rights on the parcel he wants to build on. I strongly encourage you to let him do it. And don't make him lower the roof. I'd much rather look out at good architecture than bad architecture. And I think that's important too. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Artizone, who will be followed by Eric Morley and Lee Quintana.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Town Council. Rick Artizone, Overlook Road, Los Gatos. I understand that this is a difficult decision. There's a lot of people standing up pro and con here. I think we have to realize that there is subjectivity. There always has been subjectivity in the decisions that are made by the council with regard to ordinances. We have to realize also that density is important to look at, and to preserve our hillside, how do we take that into consideration? There are circumstances which are unusual, this being one of them, with either that you have higher density or lower density with a lot of thought going into that. So I understand the difficulty behind this, but the common sense does have to appeal here. And I believe that if you take that common sense approach and realize that there is a benefit in taking that and saying let's reduce the density and produce a concept here that's well thought out, it is really to everyone's benefit. I understand we get tied up in what people would consider the legal ramifications, but like it says in the ordinance, you do have subjectivity. You do have the ability to make commonsensical decisions, and we've seen it over the years as being in the real estate business, been involved in a lot of design projects with customers, and have seen that subjectivity come into play. So I look to you to say, please, give him the benefit of the doubt, go through the specifics, and do approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Morley.
Good evening, Mayor, Spector, and council members. My name is Eric Morley. I live at 16322 Lilac Lane in Los Gatos. I was born and raised in town, live here today, operate a business in town, own property in the historic downtown, and care very much about not just the future but the past of the community, and I think we all do. And I've been following this project for a number of years, and I have spoken in the past in support of the project. As you know, the project has gone through major revisions, major iterations, has been reduced substantially over the last number of years, and I would encourage you to approve the plan this evening. I am a developer, and what I can tell you is that the highest and best use for the property is subdivision, is 2 homes, is 2 barns, is 2 roads, is 2 lots from an economic perspective. The applicant is not looking at the economic perspective, but what is the best and what is a win for the town, his neighbors, and his family. And so I would hope that the council this evening does see the forest through the trees and acknowledges the applicant's thoughtful, flexible, balanced, and responsible approach to the project by approving it this evening as proposed. And I very much appreciate all the time that you've spent on this for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Quintana, who will be followed by Charles Berger and Peggy Dallas.
Thank you. I'm Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I have over 15 years of experience as a professional planner in San Jose, most of those years spent in the planning department's environmental review section, exclusively reviewing and evaluating environmental documents to ensure their accuracy, their adequacy, and to ensure that they were understandable by the public. During that time, I've reviewed hundreds of initial studies and environmental reports. In addition, I served on the General Plan Committee and on the Architect and Hillside Standards Committee during the revision of the General Plan and the writing of the Hillside Standards. I have several things I want to talk about tonight, the first of which is the question of the lot split and whether it's possible. If you look at this, it's not possible based on our zoning code and on the Hillside Specific Plan. Hillside Specific Plan calls for a minimum of 2.5 acres. The zoning code also has provisions that limit the subdividability of a parcel that was part of an original subdivision having to go back to the main parcel. It's very clear. There are about 40 acres. You need a minimum of 2.5 acres. That's 16 houses. That was why the original subdivision was lowered to 16 lots. Secondly, in terms of the environmental question, in response to my comments on the negative declaration, the Friends of Lagoon Valley was cited. That is not a secret case. It would have been much more appropriate to cite Pocket Protectors, which found that a fair argument could be made to require an EIR if a proposed project is not consistent with the General Plan, Specific Plan, or adopted land use regulations. The Hillside Development Standards are land use regulations with standards and guidelines. And they provide the development of the town, and they provide just about the only criteria significance.
Thank you.
Jeez. No questions. Sorry.
Charles Berger.
Good evening. My name is Charles Berger. I live at 15681 Kennedy Road. My property forms the eastern boundary to this property. I'd like to state my complete support for the DeSantis project, and my wife's as well. Unfortunately, she's out of town tonight. We are in agreement with the aesthetics. We are excited about the fact that they have taken the time to acknowledge the beauty of the hillside and be ecologically responsible, in fact, proactive ecologically. I've watched this process throughout its entire span here. I think the DeSantis have made a number of quantum moves towards meeting the Hillside Ordinance and the spirit of the Hillside Ordinance. And most of all, I really would be disappointed if this council makes a decision that would result in far more hillside being destroyed, with this property being subdivided, and 2 houses with far more hardscape, and probably a spec builder who won't have the environmental sensitivity that the DeSantis family has demonstrated here. It would be a crime to see the hillside, because we were hanging to the absolute letter of a guideline that this council has the power to amend or to grant exceptions to, that we end up with a far worse impact because it's an insensitive spec builder that doesn't have the aesthetic sensitivity or the ecological sensitivity. And we have something like Kennedy Meadows, where a wetland was replaced by 15 houses. How can that be more responsible than this being a few thousand square feet over the guideline on 14 acres? Again, our family completely supports this and would be very opposed to something that had far more deleterious impact to the environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy Dallas, who will be followed by Phyllis Weber and Kathy Morgan.
Hi, I'm Peggy Dallas. I live at 17681 Foster Road in Los Gatos. I am a local architect. I served on the General Plan Task Force 1 and 2 that created the current General Plan, and I am an author of the Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines document, which is in question here. I am interested in preserving the hillside standards we developed. Since I don't live near the proposed project, and since I don't know the applicant, I might not have formed an opinion about his home, but I'm here because people I know and respect told me the sky is falling. Some have suggested, or may suggest, that this application is an attempt to undermine the hillside standards, or that approving this project will open the door to other developers hoping to get around the rules we drafted. Because of this suggestion, I have reviewed the application and reread the entire hillside standards. As a result, I believe the DeSantis project is an example of the success of the hillside standards. This applicant has worked to address the issues presented by the hillside standards and then followed staff and planning commissions and town council's guidance to further refine his project. This is how the process is supposed to work. Some have suggested that the PD ordinance is an attempt to circumvent the hillside standards and thereby nullify its effectiveness. As I read the PD, it upholds the compliance to hillside standards along with other relevant town documents. The purpose of the PD is to create one legal parcel so it cannot be subdivided in the future. Here again, this seems to be a case of the applicant working with the town to achieve minimal and sensitive development of the hillsides.
Thank you. Phyllis Weber, and she will be followed by Kathy Morgan and Michael Silva.
My name is Phyllis Weber. I live at 16140, which is Kennedy Road, which is exactly opposite the house that they're in now. And we built our house in 1972, and I will tell you that for all these years, I've hoped that there would never be anything on that property. And here we are with an opportunity to have just one home up there that we can't even see. And I want to express that Mr. Weber and I are both very much in favor of this project. The house size meets the requirements that he's reduced his house size and given up some of the things that he's wished for, and I think that's very good. The question of export has come up. Yes, there's always going to be export. There's been export for several years. Kennedy Estates, Kennedy Court, Kennedy Meadows, not counting the construction up the hill. We expect there to be construction, and we expect there to be trucks going up and down our road. I mean, it's just part of the development that has happened in the town. If this large property were subdivided and there were 2 6,000 square foot homes on it, it's likely that the visibility would increase. There would surely be export, and there would be more outbuildings. Tennis courts would be asked for, garages. Can we imagine that other people in that location wouldn't want that kind of home? with the number of trees that we have and the number of trees that they're going to have. They're taking out some trees, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were asked to put more trees, and the visibility of the home is really limited. I don't think we'll see it at all. Not that I would mind looking at a beautiful home. I don't think there's anything wrong with, I want people to see my house, and I think other people have beautiful homes, and I want to see theirs too. Finally, I just don't understand the opposition to this project for all the years that we've waited to have something wonderful there.
Thank you. Kathy Morgan?
The yellow lines are Forester Road near us and Kennedy Road. The lines outlined in orange there, which cover almost all of the lot, are the proposed grading. Indeed, something like a strip line. This project doesn't meet, it exceeds the cuts and fills that are allowable. The grading summary that you have shows that the amount of fill for the house is 300% more than is allowed. Same for the driveway, 300% more. Same for the cabana. The tennis court fill is 500% more than is allowed. This house would also exceed the allowable floor area. That's one of the things it doesn't do. But without meeting all the criteria that must be met. Page 29 of the standard says grading to accommodate the building area that exceeds the allowed will be minimized. Number 4 says all standards and applicable guidelines are being met, one of the conditions. Development outside the LRDA, house, garages, tennis court, cabana, pool, maintenance buildings. This project should and could be all inside the LRDA. Page 10, Section F, Standards versus Guidelines, says the development plans must demonstrate full compliance with all standards whenever site conditions require, unless there's not a substantial reason. Our hillside standards were a matter of public record in 2004. Page 5 says the applicant should learn them. The fact that it's big and steep is no substantial reason why special exceptions should be made. It's a substantial reason why the standards are more important than ever.
We'll have Michael Silva followed by Sandy Decker and George, looks like Mater.
Michael Silva. I've asked the town clerk if she would hand you each some sample of rock, and I believe there's a bag next to you. And that bag is 12 pounds for Mr. Brzezinski, 12 pounds for Mr. Wasserman, 8 pounds for Mayor Spector, 10 pounds for Mrs. McNutt, and 10 pounds for Mr. Glickman. Those rocks were found in my backyard, well, actually the neighbor's backyard. One small Bobcat scoop, and I cleaned them up, washed them off so you didn't have to deal with dirt. Please take them home and think about them. I want to thank Mr. Glickman in particular for his comment to me at my last presentation where I did not apparently use the right language. It's true that one may lead others in the wrong direction of thinking by words one uses. I used the word dirt, to which Mr. Glickman's response was, I don't care about the dirt. Inasmuch as I was coming from a position of green environment, his comment response prompted me to think further about what I had said. I've had years of experience dealing with the earth in the mountain and hillside environments. I lived in the mountains for 19 years through fire, flood, earthquake, and snow, and as a member of a private homeowners road association. and maintenance persons for that. We were in direct contact with the county departments of roads and earth stability. That being said, I want to add to the public record that I called the director of public works for our town, asked him for the rating of weight for travel on our roads and the approximate weight of dump trucks. I was told a return call would follow in a day or two with that information. The next day, I did in fact get a call back, to which the answer was that the info was of too sensitive a nature, and Suzanne Davis of the Community Development Department would call me with the answers to my questions. I have not received those calls.
Sandy Decker, followed by George Mader and Citizen Ray.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's wonderful. It's not wonderful. It's there. Good evening, Council. In the 40 years I've lived here, I have been so impressed with the hundreds of people who have volunteered to sit on committees, commission, task forces to ensure that those hillsides and mountains are preserved and protected by helping to create the following lawful documents: the General Plan, Hillside Specific Plan, the Hillside Guidelines, and Development Standards. This application simply does not meet with any of these standards that this town has created. Those documents give you all the reasons necessary to deny this project. The general plan states hillside residential designation provides for very low-density, rural-type, single-family residential development that is compatible with the unique mountain terrain. This application is not compatible with this terrain. In fact, it will create its own terrain by grading 23 feet off the uppermost portion of the site and adding 16 feet to the lowest portion of the site. The hillside specific plan was written specifically, and I quote, to preserve the irreplaceable natural environment of our mountains and hillsides. This application covers the natural environment with 20,000 square feet of development, a Mediterranean-style house, which is 14,000 square feet, a guest house, a pool, a cabana, a gatehouse, an art studio, multiple garages, a tennis pavilion, and extensive formal landscaping and pools and ponds. With this application, you simply destroy the irreplaceable. And finally, just 4 years ago, after 4 years of community input, you signed the Hillside Guidelines and Development Standards and gave yourself the tool that requires design excellence, sustainable development, and preservation of the natural environment. To ensure these Hillside Guidelines, these development parameters are required. Maintain the existing open, wooded, rural character. Build in harmony with the natural setting. Conform to landform and use features of natural landscape. Preserve wildlife habitat and wildlife movement. This application meets none of those.
George Matter or Mader, followed by Citizen Ray and Christine Curry.
Mayor Spector, council members, my name is George Mader. I'm an urban planner with a firm, city planning firm in Menlo Park. And I hate to say it, I've had 50 years of experience in the Bay Area in planning. Mrs. Decker, Curry, and Quintana retained our firm to review the DeSantis project. Thank you. Over the last 7 months, we've reviewed town records and visited the location of the site. In particular, we evaluated the project with respect to the hillside development standards and guidelines. We met on one occasion with Mr. Lortz, Mr. Suda, and Ms. Davis. We have concluded that the project, as currently designed, should not be approved for several reasons. The reasons are included in the detailed letter from our clients dated May 1, which is in your packets. I will, however, summarize a few points. It had been purported that Mr. DeSantis owns 2 parcels. Mr. DeSantis does not claim that now. Santa Clara County Assessor's Office has confirmed he has 1 legal parcel. The line on his parcel is really an assessment line that divides the property into 2 taxing districts. No one should assume that he now owns 2 parcels. And now probably the most critical point. Information presented by Lee Quintana and also reinforced by, I believe it was Mrs. Hill, points out that the hillside specific plan, which requires a minimum parcel size of 2.5 acres, was adopted prior to approval of the Maslessa map. Further, that while Mr. Maslesa's original map showed 18 lots, He agreed to adhere to the 2.5 acre standard that reduced the number of lots from 18 to 16. Now, the current zoning ordinance makes it clear that any reevaluation of a property requires evaluation under the current hillside zoning regulations, which results in 16 lots, no more. Several exceptions to the hillside ordinance are particularly important, standards and guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. Citizen Ray, who will be followed by Christine Curry and Craig Elliott.
Two minutes, that's all we get? Woo! Our mountain is at stake. The glorious Los Gatos Mountain is about to be raped, and we get 2 minutes. I don't think so, okay? What's the most important thought in 2 minutes? I'd say the most important thing is that's our mountain. Los Gatos is our mountain. It is a public resource, private land, but through community values and standards and public documents, we have transformed it into a public resource. It is a no-name mountain, which kind of tells you something about Los Gatos. This is Los Gatos. The mountain is Los Gatos. And we want to throw it away to this man here with this monstrous ego. One couple's going to live in this monstrous home. Unbelievable. And they're going to take bulldozers and they're going to bulldoze and scalp that ridge 23 feet deep, 23 feet deep to satisfy his ego. Unbelievable. Okay? The public documents preclude this type of treatment, okay? If this goes forward, we're looking at, I'm telling you, a lawsuit, or we're looking at a referendum. It will not go over my dead body. I'm telling you. It is so ugly. The public has never been on the site. We've never been allowed to see the site. There are no story poles. And the lies are put out. You can't see it. Baloney. I went up to Villa La Teresita yesterday in Lavinia, and I'm looking right down on it. And those people that live there all look down on it. You want to hear any more?
Christine Curry, I do.
Oh, I do too.
Ms. Curry, your time is going to have to be running.
Good evening, Council. My name is Christine Curry. I reside at 117 Broadway. We've done some homework here on this, and in case any of you want to know what 3.46 acres of grading looks like on a mountainside, it looks like this. It's equal to 3 football fields. That's including the end zones, folks. So just so you know, that's a 33% increase over the last plan. The last plan in April, I think, was a plan of 2.7 acres. Now we are looking at 3.46 acres. Just if you're curious about grading comparisons, I think this was kind of a fun story. Fun in kind of a, warped sense of the environmental word. The DeSantis property will have more than 25,000 square cubic yards removed. So examples of local milestones in development. Netflix, our friends down the street, you've seen that big monstrous building, we all rent movies from them. They're about 12,500. 7+ average size homes here in Los Gatos. That's about 7,000, maybe a little less. So this is giving you an idea of just grading. This is for one home, which, by the way, because of the topography and the 30% slope, cannot be. Only one can be built on that particular slope. Cut and fill grading figures. Why are these important? I'll tell you why. Because they've doubled. If you look at this number here in the tall. This is basically the 08 number. This is where grading and fill is today. Off-haul of cubic yards, and the fill has doubled. So now we have our neighbors up on Teresita Way who say, wow, what am I going to do? I'm going to have this huge monstrosity I'm going to get to look down at this huge monstrosity. So I guess my question is, if we have an opportunity to look at this as neighbors, you get to make the choice. Thank you very much.
All right, Craig Elliott, who will be followed by Tom Vlasic and Dave Wiseman.
Thank you very much. My name's Craig Elliott. I live at 16199 Kennedy Road. It's on the house just previous to the DeSantis property. Rob and Renee have given us a lot of opportunity to look at their plan, and we have taken a look at it, and being next door neighbors, believe that this is a unique opportunity for Los Gatos to be able to take a significant property of 13.7 acres, have it pulled into one parcel, so it will never be subdivided. There's no argument about that. He'll be able to give up that, and his only thing that he asks is to have some modifications to the plan. And we think that looking at from an environmental standpoint and aesthetic standpoint, this is a significant opportunity to have this piece of land be improved and be kind of locked in for the duration of time now with Los Gatos instead of having other things done to it. So we're very much, my wife and I are very much in support of this plan and have been familiar with it for the last several years. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Vlasic.
Good evening. I'm Tom Vlasic, Vice President of Spangle Associates. I'm a partner with George Mader. Over 25 years of experience in evaluating hillside residential applications on behalf of local councils and boards. The emphasis of the work that we do is to ensure that the design is tailored to fit the site and not the site altered unnecessarily to fit the project, and this is exactly what your plans and regulations and standards call for. Any exception or PD ordinance should be for the specific purpose of crafting a better fit to the unique conditions of the property and not manipulating the property to fit the desired development. From a fundamental planning perspective, these tools are being misused here in our opinion. The problem is well beyond any question of subdivision. You look at the, in any case, the visuals have demonstrated you're putting a pond on the top of a ridge where you would never see a pond. That's one example of going well beyond the provisions of your standards. The justifications that have come out from your staff on support of the exceptions sound to me like justifications for manipulating the site to fit the desired development, not the opposite. You're proposing 23 feet of cut of native slope. The standards allow for a maximum of 8 feet. There's been no attempt to step the house with the site conditions or blend it with the native terrain. It's possible to craft a solution to do that. It takes more effort. It will require more creative efforts by the project design team. And that's exactly what your hillside standards and plans call for. The fill for the tennis court is even more egregious. To suggest that that fill is appropriate to keep on site as a support for the findings for the 23 feet of cut at the house makes that finding even more inappropriate. So that really, we just can't see where that justification comes from. The height exception is purely for an architectural solution. It has nothing to further the objectives of the hillside standards. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we're going to have David Wiseman, followed by Paul Quintana and Yolanda Drager.
Dave Weissman, Francis Oaks Way. The purpose of an initial study is to determine whether or not a full EIR is necessary. Once again, Guyer and Guyer have managed to declare that one significant impact after another is mitigatable. Want to excavate 22,000-plus cubic yards of soil and remove 23 feet of ridgetop? No problem. They do that every day in West Virginia. Want to run 650 to 750 dump trucks weighing 30 to 40 tons each on town roads? No problem, especially since no one is going to conduct before and after comparisons of road surfaces for wear and tear. Violate the letter and the spirit of the Hillside Standards? No problem, since this was just meant to be a feel-good document anyway. And I am especially insulted since I personally put tens of hours into the committee that drafted that document. Build a house more than 2,600 square feet over the limit or threaten to subdivide? No problem for Guyer and Guyer, since they don't address these issues at all. Fortunately, we have Lee Bowman's 1988 letter in your packet and Mrs. Hill's statement that this property is not subdividable. And where is staff coming from in their report? You tell me if you think their report is objective. They say that 15,500 feet of the project extends onto slopes over 30% and is thus out of the LRDA. The report then says staff estimates that the amount of development outside the LRDA is 2% of the project site. Well, in fact, it is precisely 2.60%, which the last time I checked rounds up to 3. Staff says that grading area will be minimized. What an incredible statement when cuts for this house will be 23 feet in places. Grading can only be minimized by reducing the overall footprint of the complex. Mr. Wasserman's comments are right on the money. Several years ago, Council courageously denied the McCarthy project. You should do that again now. Thank you.
Paul Quintana, Yolanda Drager, and Carl Guardino.
My name is Paul Quintana, and actually, I consider all of you my neighbors, interestingly enough, and I'm not sure how many...
Paul, I'm going to have you talk to us, please.
I'm sorry, I do consider all of them my neighbors. I'm not sure how many of them besides myself feel blackmailed by the issue of 2 houses, and I think if that comes to be, that's your job, is to rule on those 2 houses adequately. I have to say, you've been looking at the pictures. My mother always told me to say something nice or not to talk at all. I might as well sit down because I can't find anything nice to say about this project, but I'm going to go on. I've lived in Los Gatos for 35 years. I'm certainly no expert, but I do follow the issues in the town, and I vote in every election. I therefore wonder why our town citizens, as has been mentioned, put so much time and effort into coming up with standards, laws, rules, things that my wife and other people talk about, if we're going to just ignore not only the words, but the spirit of them. This is a massive development, no matter how you look at it. So 1,600 linear feet of retaining walls just because of the grading issues which you've heard about. There's, as opposed to what I heard earlier, I found no biology report. There was a lukewarm arborist report. There's a lot of spin going on this, whether it needs an IRA or not. But this is a huge, massive project, and we're saying, let's spin it, and maybe we don't. You know, I hear so much spin from politics, and now I'm hearing in my own town and in this area. I'm wondering whether this is the legacy that you guys want to leave for the town and this town council, the legacy of approving this and all the development that will subsequently follow this. I personally believe if you can't say no to this, you're not going to be able to say no to the next project that comes in equally to this size, because if you can't say no now, when can you say no? So I would really urge you strongly to think about what this pictures show and do what is best for the community and not what is best for the applicant. That's certainly at our expense. Thank you.
Thank you. Yolanda Drager, Carl Guardino, and then Pete Siemens.
My name's Yolanda Drager. I live at 16200 Maya Way, Aztec Ridge. Thank you for letting me speak with you tonight. I have spoken and addressed this council before on my concerns with the hillside developments. I am a hillside resident just above you right here. This project will set a precedence. If you're familiar with Loma Alta and Johnson Avenue and look straight up, there's 36 acres there that is county, even though I can walk from here up there. And they're now proposing 9 houses. the property owner at one point said, we'd like to build a 25,000 square foot house. Listen, you are setting a precedence. I look over from my bedroom on top of the McCarthy project. It takes the whole hillside, the top of it. When the lights turn on, it's like the airport. On Aztec Ridge, we look down on Kennedy. They're building a 1,600 linear feet of retaining wall for a driveway. Do you think that's not going to be lit? That's almost a quarter of a mile. I ask you tonight to listen to the people who spent a lot of hours putting together a comprehensive, environmentally sensitive plan for our hillsides. I've lived here my whole life. You're going to lose them. And that's what our community is all about. This is very, very important. You will lose the entire ambiance of this town if you don't listen to your community that have given you clear guidelines of what they want here. It really takes a decision out of your hands if you simply listen to what they've said. Thank you.
Thank you. Carl Guardino.
Thank you, Mayor Spector and members of the council. My name is Carl Guardino. I live at 489 Bird Avenue here in Los Gatos. I'm here tonight as a private citizen so that there is no misunderstanding in thinking that I'm here for my day job at which I sometimes appear before you. I'm speaking in support of the project applicant tonight and just wanted to leave you with two quick thoughts. First, the project itself in terms of Building Green. I think you're all familiar with the Build It Green and Green Point rating system. They look for at least 50 points. This development has 280 points, which is off the charts for the Build It Green work. The second is the people. We've heard some interesting ways to describe the DeSantos family tonight, and that's not what our town is about. The DeSantos family is a good family that cares deeply about Los Gatos, as we all do here tonight, whether we're for or against their proposal. And I want to bring it back to the solid people that they are, that they care about this community, and I hope that you will consider this development tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Pete Siemens, my last card.
Yes, my name is Pete Siemens. I live at 69 Ellenwood, Los Gatos. I kind of wear two hats. One is with on the board of the Open Space District. Our staff took a look at this project a year ago, and I think at the initial study phase we had some official staff input and then never heard back. The staff is concerned that this sets a precedent, and the fact that we're not adjacent landowners is not the issue. The issue is precedent. And we're looking at other properties that are adjacent to the district, both in the town and also in the county, because the county is going to look at this and say, well, Los Gatos doesn't care about upholding their own hillside standards, so why should we do anything different? So that's really a big concern. The staff doesn't feel that the PD process is appropriate to get around the zoning regulations, particularly for a single lot, for a single owner. And then as a resident, 30 years ago I walked the town door to door, probably covered half the town, and my person that ran with covered the other half. The general consensus was that people wanted to see the hillsides protected. They didn't want to see intense development, and didn't want to see the hills sliced and diced for flatland projects in the hills. That this was a wonderful project if it was on flat ground. So I have no argument with it on that basis, but not in the hillsides. And I think we spent a lot of time over the years doing hillside planning, all the way from 1978 when I was on the council all the way till now, trying to get a handle around giving staff the tools to tell this kind of development meet the standards. And I think you need to keep faith with all that work and time and effort that's been put in. Keep faith with the majority of your constituents who say, let's protect the hills. Do not establish new precedents, because you won't be able to tell new people no that want to do this kind of development in other parts of the hills. Thank you.
All right, I have no further cards. And so at this time, the applicant has 5 minutes to rebut.
Give us just 1 second.
Certainly. Let's do this. We take a 5-minute break. Let's call the meeting back to order. The applicant will now have 5 minutes to rebut, and the record should reflect that amongst the applicant presenters includes Norm Mattioni, who I didn't mention last time. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. It's okay. Ready? Okay to start?
Yes.
Okay, to start off, what I think I'm going to do is have Peggy Dallas come up and finish what she was speaking. Then Norm will say a couple minutes, and then I'll come in and recap.
Thank you. I had just said that PD is a sort of a win-win solution for minimizing development. Then I wanted to say the issue of cut and fill also seems distorted to me as presented by others. As I understand it, according to the hillside standards and general plan, cut and fill is secondary to the issue of preserving the view of the hillsides and from visible development. The few cases where the cut exceeds the hillside development standards has been in an effort to reduce visibility. The other exceptions are minor. Roof height slightly over at the ridges and peak where the mass is very little, and 2% of the project being outside the LDRA. As for exceeding the allowable floor area, this project meets and exceeds the criteria necessary for increasing the floor area. I'd like to state for the record that I am in favor of approving the plan development ordinance for the DeSantis project because I believe it meets the criteria of the hillside standards except for a few justified exceptions, and it absolutely meets the intent of the hillside standards.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The first question I heard tonight from Councilman Glickman was to an issue that I have also looked at, and that's the subdividability of the lot. Your city attorney or town attorney has addressed that. Let me just add a point to it from the record of 1978 when the subdivision was processed. In asking for the applicant to re-examine his 18-lot proposed subdivision, the commission asked for alternate subdivision proposals to reduce, or to produce, rather, greater variation in building and street alignment. It also asked to consider narrowing the width of Forester Avenue and providing more on-site parking rather than street parking. All of those type of concerns were the lot pattern that you've seen along Forester. Had nothing to do with the lot that's before you tonight. And thus, when the density was reduced, and that was a suggestion as a part of your alternative proposals, the letter of March 10, 78 states, the commission requested that you consider a decrease in density. The density came out of the alignment of Forester Road and the lots that were proposed there. As to the PD ordinance, I remember years back, and I'm not saying anything negative about Aztec Ridge, but there was a lot of controversy over that. That was not produced under a plan development zoning. Plan development is advanced planning. We've come a long way from the 60s in our planning concepts, and that gives you a lot more detailed look at a property and enabling you to condition it, such as one of your conditions that I think arose out of the experience with the reservoir property of San Jose Water Company years ago, and the number of trucks that would be hauling fill material, a vast amount of material up the road, College Avenue area. And the conditions were to survey the road condition, to be sure that you put it back, and also to set time limits for those trucks to move. Thank you.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me respond to the photographs that I saw up there. And let me say, as a technologist, I'm a little bit amazed by the use of bad technology and embarrassed for the folks that presented that, and I'm embarrassed for the town and embarrassed that we are trying to make decisions off of archaic technology capabilities that were shown there. Surely that is offensive. Surely doesn't take into account many, many different aspects of the project, and I think it stands erroneous as stand. Now, secondly, I would like to start by thanking everyone who showed up to support my project tonight. I'd also like to say the Hillside Standards and Guidelines author, architect that spoke, I think spoke quite eloquently. But the bottom line is this project creates less environmental impact than the alternative to this project. It's been 4 years. All concerns raised tonight are nothing new. And why this opposition tonight would prefer to see me or someone else develop the property and impact the environment and go against the neighbors and miss the opportunity for a model green home truly puzzles me. So I really hope that you'll be able to have a positive outcome on tonight, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant? No? All right, thank you. Public hearing is now closed. And it is now to the council for Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you everyone that's appeared here tonight. We've each spent a good number of hours going over all this in 4 or 5 inches of paper, and tonight I appreciate all the information. For myself, after going through all of this and having staff opinions and legal opinions from each side, it's come down to me where we have our Hillside Development Standards and Guidelines, and for anyone not familiar in this room, this council approved the Hillside Development Guidelines and Standards that you all so much cherish. This council approved the wording in there so that we would have that document as something to take care of these cherished hills that we all love, that makes Los Gatos so special, being a town in the hills. Just wanted to put that out there so everybody knows that. For me, I look on page 3 of our staff report, and it says, in order to approve the PD, the council must grant the 4 exceptions listed below the Hillside Development Standards. Exceptions from the standards in this document may only be granted after carefully considering the constraints of the site. Any deviation from the standards contained in this document shall include the rationale and evidence to support the deviation. The burden of proof shall be on the applicant to show that there are compelling reasons for granting the requested deviation. For me, after hearing everything that's been done, and I appreciate very much Mr. DeSantis and the revisions and all that have taken place, where we are right now feels like we're trying to put a square peg into a round hole. And I, for one, don't feel we're there yet. I look at these 4 exceptions. One is the height of the main residence. The tower is at 30 feet. Our own consulting architect said that would look good. So as I said before, the height's not a big issue for me. But when I get outside, when I get to the 3 others, development outside the least restricted development area, exceeding the allowable floor area, the grading necessary to accommodate the building area, I look at those terms, and for me what it really is it's the grading necessary to accommodate the desired building area. And if not quite so much was desired, we wouldn't have the issues that we have on the cut and fill, which come to 94. Proposed square footage is 94 feet. The allowable is 46. And so as I look at each of these exceptions, which this council must find justification for, I don't see it. What I do see is the possibility, and I know there's been discussions about subdividing versus single home versus subdividing. What's before us tonight is whether or not this single home project, as it's described and laid out, should be approved. I don't support it the way that it is. Would I prefer 1 home over 2? Yes. Would I prefer a home that did not exceed the cut and fill and going outside the LRDA from design? Yes. And for those reasons, I hope it goes that way. I'm not the applicant. I'm not in charge of design. It's not my family, et cetera, et cetera. But we have Hillside Design Standards and Guidelines. 4 exceptions must be made to go around them. And I don't believe those exceptions are necessary to be made with this particular project and property. And so for that reason, I'm not inclined to support the request for approval tonight.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to reiterate something that Councilman Wasserman said. We were up here on the dais and made the approvals. We were also sitting in the General Plan Committee when we wrote the document. This document does not belong to an individual or group. and not be inclusive of the council. And I think that from my perspective, as I look at the intent of the document, it has in its very nature the focus on preserving our hillsides, and at the same time acknowledging the fact that there will be development that occurs in the hillsides. Those are the two components. It's not a document that says we restrict all development in the hillsides. And I think that that needs to be carefully considered as we talk about conclusions on this particular proposal. The fact that you can build a 6,000 square foot house plus outbuildings within the context of the document as it's written indicates that we're not opposed to hillside development. What we're looking for is quality of design and mitigation of impacts. That's the key. Now, what's happened in this process is in the last 4 years, and there's been evolution of thought, obviously. There's been an evolution of the proposal. The fact that we're looking at this tonight is fairly typical of most of the things we do on council. These are not easy decisions. And typically in our community, we always have individuals who have very significant desires to see our community enhanced and protected. And everyone in the room who spoke tonight, on either side of the issue, as far as I'm concerned, feels that characteristic, that we all are concerned about this community. But in the context of where we are tonight, we're in an evolutionary dialogue. And we see a program that has been evolving over the course of the last 4 years. And I think that ultimately the intent of our land use is to protect our environment, to enhance our community with good architectural standards and development, and to allow both the individual who owns property to achieve his or her goals within the context of the community values. And it is a trade-off in both cases, that there are no absolutes. And when you read the document is not an absolute document. As Mr. Wasserman read very clearly, standards in this document may only be granted after carefully considering the constraints of the site. Any deviation shall include a rationale and evidence to support the deviation. The document itself that we approved and that so many of you participated in the writing of does assume that we can make decisions that go outside the narrow framework of those projects that will be that are subject to automatic approval. And because of that, I think that we need to be very careful in our considerations tonight. What I look at is in the LRDA, that at this point in time, the applicant is proposing a 2% or 2.6%, depending on how you calculate it, deviation from the restricted development area. That means that it's in great measure compliant to that. If you do the math, in great measure, it's compliant. We know that those height differentiations are predicated on architectural design. Now, someone could say it's not significant. I think for our community, architecture is significant. It's a very significant issue for us in this community. One of the reasons why we have such a beautiful community fabric is because we have, for the most part, been able to succeed architecturally. So it's not an issue that should be treated lightly. As far as the criteria for floor area, there are a number of items I think can be addressed. One is the visibility of the project, and I was particularly impressed with the testimony of the neighbors, that is the immediate neighbors, who will be those individuals who are the most affected by this development, visibility. This does not deny the impacts on the rest of the community, however. I spend a lot of time in those hills. And I would resent if anyone were to accuse me of not being sensitive to the visible impacts of this development. But I do believe that the neighbors who spoke tonight and from whom we received a number of letters should hold some weight in this discussion. There's been a great deal of discussion about the cubic yards of cut and fill. And if you notice what the council was requesting at the last meeting, it talked about cut and fill to be reduced. There is a reduction. Is it zero? No. And again, I think we need to be very cautious of assuming that we can talk about absolutes in this regard. I'm not going to focus on the green building issues. I think they're very admirable. I do believe that the applicant can very appropriately walk out of here tonight if his project is denied and immediately attempt to subdivide and put this property on the market. And I do believe that within that context would allow for a follow-on evaluation and the opportunity to put two houses on this lot. Now, some would say, no, it's not possible. Of course it's possible. We live in a country that still believes in property rights. And because of that fact, unless someone wants to step forward and say, I'll buy the hillside to protect it from incursions of development, we have to be very cautious of the decisions we make that might impact that. So those are my comments at this juncture. I'm curious what my peers feel about this project.
Further discussion? Doesn't seem like we have. I guess there isn't any. Ms. McNutt?
I think he wants ladies first, right? Okay. Gosh, everyone said all the good stuff on both sides, so it's really hard to come up with something new. If the documents that we have to work with, the general plan and the hillside guidelines were absolutely crystal clear and absolute, we wouldn't have to have a planning commission or a town council because you could just go through and measure everything and check it off and say yes or no. But, that's not the way it works. It always comes up to be a gray area or a subjective area, and that's why it has to go through planning commission and town council in order to get more input as to the values of the community and help us make decisions that are good for today and are good for the next generation. I have to say that all of the speakers had really interesting points to make, and I was making a lot of notes and kind of, doing this back and forth thing that we do when we hear really thoughtful speakers bring up a lot of information. But as has been mentioned, I believe, by someone previously up here, the speaker who really resonated with me was Mrs. Dallas, and the reason was because she understands the process that we went through to develop these documents. She understands what the intent was, and also her point about the fact that this project has evolved so much over the last 4 years shows that the process is working. What is presented tonight is significantly different than what was presented before. The documents themselves have language in there that talk about interpretation and exceptions, and so I don't think that we can automatically dismiss that and say that that's something that we cannot do. So for me, it comes down to this is a piece of property that is privately owned. It's almost 14 acres. It's a big piece of land. They want to build one house, an estate home, with a tennis court and a swimming pool. It's not going to be visible. This isn't a pristine piece of property that's never been cultivated or had earth moved around at any part in the past. It has moved since it was first created, and it's going to be a beautiful project. It's not going to have the horrendous environmental impacts that I think are greatly feared. If he could have come in and built this secretly and illegally in the middle of the night with none of us knowing about it, we wouldn't even know it was there, except for those people who already are developed, already living in the hillside, and are looking down on anything that is going to be developed anywhere in town. So, I also am going to be interested to hear what other people have to say up here, but right now, I would be inclined to approve this project if someone makes a motion.
Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Glickman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also would like to thank all of the speakers. I think that they have all very eloquently expressed the philosophy that they see appropriate for this town. And we've heard, I think, a division in philosophy. There were those who made it fairly clear that their concern is that approving projects like this, which can be perceived as being at one end of the housing spectrum, I think I probably live at the other end, and then those who see that some degree of evolution and some degree of flexibility is appropriate. The question then is, for this project, what is in the best interest of the town, and what's in the best interest of precedent, of the people who live nearby, of preserving our hillsides. But I think we can't ignore the fact that at some point we are going to have to reflect on the philosophy that guides us. And I think we've heard two honestly held but very differing philosophies expressed tonight. Then it'll also be interesting for me to find out what the majority direction of the council will be. Thank you.
Further discussion? That leaves me. I am the only person up here who did not sign on to the hillside standards. They were adopted by this council before I was elected to the council. However, I will tell you that even though I didn't write them, I have read them and reread them and studied them very carefully. Because I don't think what I do up here is based on my philosophy. I don't think what I do up here is based upon emotion or extrapolation or those kinds of factors. I think what I do up here, in fact, I know what I do up here, is to apply and enforce the standards and ordinances and general plan that have been adopted by people before me. That being said, there are some things that we know for sure in this application, and no one has debated. And that is that there are elements of this application that deviate from our hillside standards and guidelines. One is the height. Another is the development outside of the LRDA, or the least restricted development area. Another is the amount of the floor area, and the another one is the cuts and fills. So we know that for sure. Again, there's no dispute as to those items, those deviations. I agree that there are provisions in the hillside standards and guidelines that allow the council to look at the elements and to apply some discretion. However, the provisions in the hillside standards they tell us how we are supposed to analyze the exceptions that we give. There is an exception in the hillside standards if your home is going to be larger than 6,000 square feet. But that's not the exception we're looking at here, because here we have deviations that are not only the size, the square footage of the home, but as I said, other deviations, LRDA, grade, fill, and so forth. So in order to approve this project, we have to go to that section of this standard that says that we have to carefully consider the constraints of the site, and the burden of proof shall be on the applicant to show that there are compelling reasons for granting the requested deviation. So I was really focusing on this. I was focusing on the constraints of the site, and I was looking at the compelling reasons. I'll tell you what I wasn't looking at. I know there was a lot of passion out here on both sides, some people saying they can subdivide it and other people saying they can't subdivide it and getting legal opinions and so on and so forth. I am not looking at whether this site can be subdivided or not. I am not looking at what it'll be if it's 2 versus 1. I am looking at this application today and applying these standards to this application. If there were if it were subdivided and we had 2, I would be looking at each of those relative to these standards. So I am looking at this project versus these standards. And I agree with the council people who said the input we received today was articulate, and you all expressed yourself very well. You really did. You weren't consistent, you didn't agree with one another, but you did express yourself well. And so what I ultimately did is I took all of these facts, and I've also been taking a lot of notes, and I realized that in looking to what the staff has told us, the aggregate floor area of the buildings on this property is going to total 15,300 square feet. The house and the main house and the guest house is 12,891 of that. And that is what we have. That's the deviation that we have. And then we look at why do we have it? And we look at it, the reason we have it is because we have a home and a tennis court and an art studio and a pool and a cabana and a pavilion and a garage and guest quarters and a water facility. That is the why. And so when I look at what the findings that we have to make, we have to say that there are compelling reasons for deviating from our standards, and those facts do not, for me, constitute compelling reasons to deviate from our standards. And so now I will look to the council for further discussion, if any of you have more to say, or for a motion. Is that you want me to recognize you, or?
That's what that means.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Madam Mayor, first of all, I do appreciate the pregnant pause, because it's indicative of the fact that this isn't a slam dunk. This is a very difficult decision. I think that, each of us has expressed in succinct terms, perhaps some of us in lengthier, succinct terms than others, our perspectives on this. And I don't want to extend that discussion further, but I do feel that there are a number of ways in which we can evaluate this particular application. And one of those is to look at what is before us and to say, this is what we are to decide, and it is not without some of those exterior buildings that increase the amount of square footage, but when you're looking at the technical language, we are looking at the square footage of the residence itself, and that's why those numbers are significant. Just as when we would be looking at a 6,000 square foot residence that is acceptable within the guidelines without exception, then that would be the residence itself. So let's not confuse those numbers. I think it's very clear that we have to, if we're going to abide by the guidelines, we have to read the guidelines and read them explicitly as they've been detailed. I'm going back to a point of view, and that is that in this particular case, we've had an applicant who's come to us with a proposal. He's worked with the staff for the last 4 years. He is now at a point in time where we need to make a call on this. That's our job. And I think perhaps it's important that we at least assert our responsibility in that regard. And so for want of another council member making a motion, I will make the motion in this regard. And I'll make the motion directed towards approval, and we'll see where we go. First, I would move to make the negative declaration.
We have a motion to make the negative declaration. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No. Motion passes 3-2. Mr. Brzezinski, you're going to roll on
I'll
with this?
roll. The second issue then would be to adopt the mitigation monitoring plan, and that also requires a motion. So therefore, in reference to attachment 27 in the staff report, I will move that the council adopt the mitigation monitoring plan, the monitoring program.
Motion by Mr. Brzezinski to adopt the monitoring program.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. McNutt. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Passes 3-2.
The next requirement is to make findings. Those findings are contained in attachment 28 of our report, and they're subject to the conditions of approval contained in attachment 29, which is the plan development ordinance. And I'll go ahead and make those findings, and then we'll see if with that motion begin in a second. The findings required for this property, requesting the approval of a PD to construct this residence in a zoned HR 2.5 area, require consistency with the town general plan, and that the proposed zone change is internally consistent with the general plan and its elements, and I do believe that's been clearly demonstrated within the staff context. And second of all, that it's consistent with the hillside specific plan. And although this is subject to some disagreement, as I read the plan, I do think that the zone change is consistent with the hillside specific plan. So I will make that motion.
All right, I have a motion.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. McNutt, made by Mr. Brzezinski. And as I understand it, we're making, the motion is to make the required findings in attachment 28. And that's where it's stopping at this point?
If you'd like to bifurcate that, that's fine. We can do it that way. Sure. And then we'll go to the plan development ordinance after that.
That's fine. All right, discussion, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I don't know the proper person to ask, Madam Mayor, so I'll look to you for guidance. Given that we all acknowledge there's 4 exceptions, how are we saying this is consistent with the hillside specific plan?
I think that would just be something you would put out there rather than ask a council person.
Okay, I would suggest to my fellow council members, since we have all acknowledged there are 4 exceptions, as shown on page 3 and 4 of the staff report, that this project is not consistent with the hillside specific plan.
All right, I will then recognize myself and note that the hillside, what we have been talking about thus far this evening has been the hillside standards, and the findings that Mr. Brzezinski has made in this motion are for the hillside specific plan. I'm not addressing whether or not I agree that this is consistent or inconsistent with the hillside specific plan, but just noting for the record that we're talking about 2 different documents. Further discussion. Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. We all brought our different, all the council members brought their different perspectives to this very difficult issue. And I think all my fellow council members have spoken fairly eloquently about the reasons that they brought for the decisions that they made. I'd like to mention one of mine, which weighs heavily on me. It's been pointed out that this is not the first time that we've discussed this. In fact, we were almost at the point of acting on this last time when a legal issue concerning CEQA was raised. But in the process of working with the applicant on this matter, this council gave certain direction. And I think that it's very clear that the applicant has very substantially met that direction. So one of the issues that weighs on me as I make a decision is the responsibility that we who hold power have to keep faith with the direction that we give to the people who come before us. I'll mention later tonight in the context during council comment of the solid waste collection decision that was made by the JPA a few days ago, where I was swayed by the same consideration, which is the responsibility that was taken when the folks who were in elected office and had the authority to do so made some decisions that affected people, and how that responsibility weighed on us. We gave Mr. DeSantis some direction. He followed it. We had extensive discussions about what was and was not appropriate for this project. In terms of whether it meets the hillside standards and guidelines criteria for exceptions, well, that decision is made by this council, and it's crystal clear in that document that that's how those exceptions are made. And we, having discussed at length whether they were appropriate, this is the body that had the right to make that decision, and so indicated in the earlier process to Mr. DeSantis. So my position tonight, first of all, is not different than it was previously, but second of all, I also think that it's important that having given that indication to somebody and then taken him down a path, unless there was compelling new argument to do otherwise, imposes on us, and at least me, because I'm only responsible for my own decision, the responsibility to see it through. So for that reason, I'm going to be supporting this and what I expect will be the subsequent motions. Thank you.
All right, and this again is the motion on the findings. Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As a follow-up to what Councilman Glickman just said, yes, we did give direction at the previous meeting. That's what we said. But as I look back now, the direction we gave was not enough. It was not, at least I'm not proud of the direction that we gave last time. It wasn't enough. It didn't address enough issues. I still feel this project could be a single-family home designed of quality where the project meets the site restrictions and no exceptions are necessary. And I think the fact that we gave direction at a prior meeting and didn't think of all the questions at that time that night is no excuse. I accept responsibility for not thinking of 8 things and only thinking of 4 things last time. They've been brought to our attention. This council knows 4 exceptions exist, and variations and deviations are being asked of each of those exceptions. That's why I'm not supporting the motion. But I don't think, I think what we did before wasn't enough, and I think what we're doing right now isn't appropriate, but I think we're going in a different direction.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Brzezinski.
I would like to amend my motion by an inclusion. This is in response to Mr. Wasserman's comments about the four issues that require exceptions. And in context of the motion to make findings, I would like to include what has been stated in the staff's report on pages 3 and 4, wherein the discussion of the exceptions for both the height, the LRDA expansion by about 2%, and then the item 3, exceeding the allowable floor area. There are 9 different components of that, a number of which I've noted in my own notes have indicated in great measure compliance. And then in addition, the cut and fill maximum with the resulting lowering of the house as being one of the primary reasons for the amount of cut and fill. And I think, again, what we've got here is a question of conflicting values, both of which have merit. And when you have conflicting values, then you make a choice. Which one is going to be of greater value to you at any particular time? As people engaged in the human condition, we make these decisions all the time. Things are never black and white; they're always shades of gray. And in terms of what we're looking at here, you've got the conflict of the visual impacts of a structure that stands out from the side of the hill versus the cut. And it's been pointed out, I believe, by Councilwoman McNutt that this particular property was not pristine at the front end. It's been disked every year. It was a piece of property that was used in some capacity for farming. There was a road that was cut through it for the movement of vehicles to accommodate the farming that was taking place on a hillside. Those are realities in this situation. And one of the realities is that we intend to try to lower the profile of the structures to mitigate the visual impacts, and we're comparing that to the amount of cut. I wish that there were no visual impacts, and I wish that there were no cut, but that's not realistic in our world. And as a matter of fact, I actually see my neighbors. And, and I think that in any community, you have to accommodate the fact that we are looking at structures that provide habitat for individual families. And in this particular case, what I see the applicant attempting to do is compromise in both areas in order to achieve one value, and it may take precedence over the other. And so that's a finding of fact in 4, and I would like that to be submitted as part of the motion, and if the seconder will agree, we'll move on.
We have an amendment to the motion by Mr. Brzezinski to include as part of his motion the findings reflected on pages 3 and 4 as they relate to the hillside standards and guidelines. Is that acceptable to Ms. McNutt?
Absolutely.
All right, further discussion. I will not be supporting the motion, and since we have the extended pages 3 and 4 to support the findings of why this project complies with the hillside standards and guidelines, I would refer the record and like this to be and ask that it be included in the record that we also include those pages, and it's mainly page 2 of the report, and also actually the conditions that speak to the 7,560 cubic yards of fill, the 15,500 feet outside the LRDA, and the 15,000 plus square feet of building. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion passes 3-2. Mr. Brzezinski, I assume you're now going on to the conditions?
Yes, I'm going to move to approve the plan development ordinance attachment 29, which are the conditions.
We have a motion to approve the ordinance.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Brzezinski, seconded by Ms. McNutt. Discussion. The only thing I will note on that is I'm going to be voting against this, but I will note that one of the conditions has the architecture and site going to the DRC as opposed to the Planning Commission. Given the fact that this is the largest and this is a new move that this town is making, and given the fact that the EIR documents that are in our folder in support of the project refer to the architecture and site as including policy issues. I would definitely want this to go to the Planning Commission as opposed to the DRC.
Madam Mayor,
Mr. Brzezinski.
as the maker of the motion, I absolutely agree with you. In fact, I was assuming that throughout the document, it was indicated that it would return to the Planning Commission for A&S. So I would more than willingly change that condition to conform.
That is condition number 1. So condition number 1 will be, the maker of the motion is suggesting that condition number 1 be amended to return this to the Planning Commission for A&S. Ms. McNutt?
Sure, that's fine.
All right, so we have an amendment to the first condition. Further discussion. Mr. Korb.
Just for clarification of the record, Madam Mayor, I just want to make it clear to the clerk administrator that the motion is to approve the conditions in the ordinance, not to approve the ordinance itself, which is subsequent action regarding introduction of the ordinance.
Correct.
Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, we have a motion, and it amends the first condition. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. All right, so that passes 4-1. I will direct the clerk administrator to read the title of the ordinance.
Ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending the town code affecting a zone change from HR 2.5 to HR 2.5 PD for property located on Kennedy Road just east of Forester Road, APNs 537-29-007 and 008.
Thank you. Mr. Brzezinski.
I'll move to waive the reading of the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Brzezinski, seconded by Ms. McNutt to waive the reading. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Mr. Brzezinski.
Move to introduce the ordinance to effectuate Plan Development PD 043. Yes, that's it.
Second. Motion by Mr. Brzezinski, seconded by Ms. McNutt to introduce the ordinance to effectuate PD 043. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Passes 4-1. Oh, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, a no on 6.
Okay, so that is a 3-2 with Mr. Wasserman and Ms. Spector voting no. And as far as I read our report, I'll look to staff. I think we're done with this. Thank you. I will wait about a minute before we get on to other business. All right, other business. Agenda item 11, consider supporting the continuation of past practices for the appointment of West Valley City representatives to the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority. Staff report.
Yes. Madam Mayor, members of the council, at your last meeting, Councilmember Steve Glickman and I believe Joe Brzezinski asked that this item be agendized for tonight's discussion. It is the council discussion of discussions that have been happening at the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority regarding changes to their governance structure. I indicated in the staff report that the VTA board was meeting last Thursday and that I'd provide an oral update on their action. And I referred to you to the first attachment to the staff report. The Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority Board of Directors did indeed adopt the first 3 recommendations in the VTA staff report, which eliminates the automatic rotation of representatives through the city groupings. It retains the 2-year term for city group representatives, but encourages the city groupings to reappoint to allow development of longevity, expertise, and leadership. And third, that the appointment of VTA representatives from the city groupings take into account experience with transportation and longevity. All three of those have been the past practices of the West Valley Cities Group and is not viewed as a significant change. The fourth item that was before the board has been postponed for decisive action until their August meeting, and that's the actual configuration of the city groupings, and that's the issue that remains open if the town wishes to take action on that. The change that affects the town of Los Gatos is the proposed move of Los Altos Hills to the West Valley Cities grouping, which the current VTA representative from the West Valley Cities, Mayor Dolly Sandoval of Cupertino, has already expressed an opinion in opposition to that transfer of Los Altos Hills to the West Valley Cities grouping, but it would be appropriate for our town, if we so chose, to take a specific position on that or any of the other city grouping changes that are proposed. The big change that's proposed is to set up a new South County cities grouping that would include Morgan Hill, Gilroy, and the unincorporated area called San Martin. So that concludes staff report. We'll answer any questions you have available. You have.
All right, thank you. Let me, as I understand it, numbers 1 through 3 have already been adopted before our meeting has even taken place, and so there's nothing to do there. We could take a position tonight with regard to number 4 in Los Altos Hills, or we could not. Is that where we are?
Correct.
All right. Look to council then. Mr. Glickman.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank Councilmember Brzezinski for joining me and encouraging our council to weigh in on this. I believe, and I think this is a reflection of input that came from our mayor and town manager when they meet in the mayor-manager meetings with the Cities Association. We would have supported the first 3 points that the VTA board adopted, so I'm pleased to say that we don't need to worry about that because that's where we would have been. But I do want to talk about the issue of city groupings. And for those of you who, and which is practically everybody, this is arcane, the Valley Transportation Authority Board was established by legislation to seat a certain fixed number of people from certain agencies. The city of San Jose, having the largest population, has a significantly larger number of seats on the board. The Board of Supervisors has seats. And then the remaining seats for what are called the smaller cities are allocated to those cities in groups called city groupings, and we're in a group with the West Valley group, which I believe includes Los Gatos, Cupertino, Saratoga, Monte Sereno, and if I'm missing one, I apologize.
Cupertino.
Los Gatos and Cupertino. I think I mentioned Cupertino. It was proposed by Morgan Hill Councilmember Sellers that the city groupings be modified. And the important issue about the city groupings is that these groupings each get to appoint a member of the VTA board. And it was suggested by Councilmember Sellers that the groupings have some realignment to have a more equal population balance. The problem is that what he suggested was that the city of Los Altos Hills, to accomplish that, be added to the West Valley grouping. And while we have great respect and affection for the city of Los Altos Hills and certainly have a great deal in common with their transportation concerns because we have carriage rides, nonetheless, I think that geographic considerations in terms of issues that come before different areas, whether we're served by light rail or bus rapid transit or potentially by BART or whether we're on the Caltrain line, that the interest groups would more appropriately be aligned along those lines. And for that reason, it would be my suggestion to my fellow council members that the town of Los Gatos take a position in opposition to this modification. Again, with no disrespect to the city of Los Altos Hills, but they just don't fit in the West Valley. Thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Brzezinski.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate Councilman Glickman's analysis and summary and analysis, because as he said, it is arcane. If you saw the chart indicating how this whole process works over periods of time, it's pretty amazing that that the board rotates into congruence at all. But I would agree with him that it seems that that issue of attempting to reframe the communities engaged in each of the small city groupings needs a lot more work. And I think the prime mover on this is the South County seat that is currently comprised of Morgan Hill, Gilroy, and Milpitas. And if there was any disconnect along the West Valley connection to, or the West Valley corridor to Los Altos Hills, there's a greater disconnect, obviously, on the Milpitas, Morgan Hill, Gilroy component. That's the sticking point, I believe. And I don't know how that's going to be worked out. And I would agree that it doesn't seem congruent to have Los Altos Hills move down the hills to join us. The West Valley Groupings organization has taken the lead in most of the changes or recommendations. In fact, went ahead and self-approved a continuance of Dolly Sandoval's seat on the board. And from that, really, that was the model for the evaluation of this overall to the rest of the organization. I know that this isn't going to occur till August, and I would assume that we really don't have to come to closure on this tonight. But I, too, would feel very, at this point, uncomfortable with the way the restructuring in that city groupings component is taking place.
All right, I'll look to Mr. Larson.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, given the comments of the two representatives who have and currently represent us to VTA, if the council wanted to be more explicit in the policy direction, they could direct staff to prepare a letter for the mayor's signature to VTA, discouraging the reallocation or the realignment of Los Altos Hills to the West Valley cities grouping. And that would be direction to staff, which is appropriate by action and motion that's recorded in the minutes.
Mr. Brzezinski.
I'd like to ask the question of the mayor and manager, or mayor and or manager. Has the question of the city groupings inclusion in Los Altos Hills, has that discussion taken place at the West Valley Mayors and Managers meeting at this point?
I would say yes, Mr. Larson. Go ahead.
Yes, it has, and it is reflected in Mayor Sandoval's note to the West Valley mayors that was circulated to the VTA board as well.
All right, so in other words,
there is concurrence with the rest of our West Valley cities on that.
Okay, thank you.
So does anyone here want to take an action, or should we?
Well, if with no objection, I will then move that staff be directed to prepare a letter from the town of Los Gatos for the mayor's signature, reflecting the consensus of our council, reflecting the discussion tonight.
I'll second that.
Motion by Mr. Glickman, seconded by Mr. Brzezinski. Discussion, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. We have agenda item 8, the council agency minutes of April 21st, 2008, pulled by Citizen Ray.
All right. Well, let's see if we can get some democracy to work here in this rather sad little community. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Well, we'll see what the future lies. Lawsuit, referendum. Back to the subject. The minutes on page 5 say that I commented that there was no protection against flying balls at the bleachers along the side of Bolster Field. A very incomplete statement by our, in my opinion, pathetic clerk, okay? What I said was, the bleachers next to the batting cage, are wide open to a line drive foul some 50 foot away. Okay? I went back and double checked because I was called as to whether I was accurate or not. I went back and double checked, and I am accurate. So I want you to know it's in the public record, and I will be a witness for the prosecution if some little child is killed, damaged, the mother or a grandparent, okay? It's the dynamics of Sarah Cole are all right here. So I want you to correct that if you don't mind. And also, the comment by, again, this pathetic woman, where she said, question under the matter of 13 and a half acres at Vasona Park was not listed in the recreation survey discussed at the council retreat. Well, what I said was the 13 and a half acres of town property, okay? Town property, which is an extension of Oak Meadow Park, were not included in the inventory of town property. That's what I said, and I want it in there. If you don't put it in there, it will come up again and again and again, because that's what I said, and the minutes typically are pathetic because of the incompetence or willful neglect by this pathetic woman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to approve the minutes.
Motion by Mr. Brzezinski, seconded by Mr. Wasserman to approve the minutes. Discussion, hearing none. All in favor? I'm sorry, Mr. Wasserman.
Thank you. I'm just waiting to speak.
Oh, that's it? Okay.
Well, I had a comment to make. You closed the public portion, correct?
Yes, I did.
Thank you. I just wanted to, regarding the comment about Balzer and the foul balls and all, I suggest anyone who shares that concern express those concerns to Little League, the organization that is operating their organization at the town-owned park, and I'm sure they'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Larson.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, staff supports the minutes as presented and submitted to the council as an accurate reflection of the dialogue that evening.
Thank you. Further discussion? All right, now hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Council matters? Mr. Glickman.
Thank you. As I made reference to in an earlier comment, I represent the town of Los Gatos on the West Valley Solid Waste JPA, and a vote was taken this past Thursday, and the vote was unanimous by the cities of Los Gatos, Monte Sereno, Saratoga, and Campbell to modify the rates as the contract would require, but we further made a modification to eliminate the hard-to-serve rate. This is a decision that I very much appreciate the input of my fellow council members. We had it earlier, and that weighed on my decision, but ultimately I concurred with the representatives of the other cities that it was in the broadest interest of the general population not to have this distinction and the uncertainty that the collection company struggled with as to who was and who wasn't hard to serve. The net outcome of that is that the rates would have had to have gone up on the typical homeowner's 35-gallon container. A typical homeowner uses a 35-gallon container by 50 cents. The hard-to-serve folks paid $5 extra for the same period. And by our action, the net rate spread out is an additional 50 cents. So there will be 10% of the people not paying $5 and everybody else paying an extra 50 cents. And that way, we will not have to deal with the question of who is and who isn't hard to serve and why. And very briefly, part of that decision, on my part at least, was, as I mentioned earlier, influenced by the fact that people who had formerly not been hard to serve became hard to serve as part of that board's action to choose a new vendor with new technology. And so what ultimately influenced my decision was the fact that people were impacted by something we did, and that therefore I felt more comfortable doing what I could to mitigate that. So that being the case, when the new rates come out, I believe it's in July, everybody will pay the same, and the company will absorb the cost of serving those folks who, for whatever reason, can't be served by the large automated trucks that we've all come to know and love. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? One question, this is actually a question for Mr. Przinski. Neither you nor I is available to attend the city's meeting on Thursday evening, and so I was wondering if you wanted to find someone else to do it?
What a great opportunity. In context, yes, we've got the Santa Clara County Cities Association meeting on Thursday. I'm going to be out of town. The mayor's not available. That runs the whole gamut of the person who owns the seat and the alternate. So Joanne Benjamin would really like town representation. They're going to vote on the budget. It's basically an up or down budget. And she's concerned about obtaining a quorum, and we've been very faithful to being there. So it starts at 7 o'clock and goes no later than 9 o'clock at Centerville City Hall. And it's open then for any council member who'd be willing to take that.
Is there anyone interested?
Looks like Mr. Glickman.
They say in the Army is never volunteer, but having done it before, if no other council member wishes to, I'll be willing.
Thank you, Mr. Glickman.
That's very generous of you, Mr. Glickman, and the packet is upstairs in the secretary's desk, okay?
All right, anything else on council matters? No. Manager matters.
Two quick items, Madam Mayor, members of the council. First, council direction. We've been advertising and soliciting applicants for the General Plan Update Advisory Committee. The deadline for those applications is May 16th, and then the appointment process will come to council in June. And given that there are up to 10 seats available for council appointment, I just wanted to use this opportunity to remind the public that they're welcome to apply as Los Gatos residents who do not currently serve on a board or commission. And last, I just wanted to offer my thanks to the town clerk staff for their extraordinary hours and dedication to the service of this community. So thank you.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.